Hello, all of my lovely, lovely, lovelies. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Love Dripping from the Walls. And today I wanted to talk to you about current events, what's going on in the world with the protests that were sparked in reaction to the murder of George Floyd. And when I say it's in reaction to the murder of George Floyd, I do and I don't mean that. It was in reaction to that murder, and it's also in response to the years and generations of oppression. It's not in response to just one event. However, I am going to get to that. I'm not going to we're not going to talk about that immediately. I wanted to, well, we are, that's pretty much all we're going to talk about. I wanted to, I'm not going to get this right. And I want to mainly talk to other white people. I am white. If you're watching the video, you can see that I'm white. If you're not watching the video, you can't see that I'm white, so that I am white. And I am mainly going to be talking to other white people about what is going on in the country and what we can do that is in support and being an ally, and also what we're doing that we might think is being supportive or an ally and it's actually not. And also what I want to talk about is things that we're doing that are actually counterproductive or harmful. And this is something that I will preface this with just saying that this is something that I'm still learning, and I want to have a conversation. This is not me saying all of the things that I'm saying are the truth. This is me having a conversation with you about what's going on, what we can actually do, because I assert that the people who are listening to my podcast, given that my podcast is all about love, are interested in love. And you might ask, why am I talking about current events on a podcast about love? And I'll tell you why. So you can't have love dripping from the walls of your life when there's suffering going on around you. Love dripping from the walls of your life is not just about you and what you need. That's definitely part of it. But if you're getting what you need, but other people aren't, that's not how it works. You can't live in a world where there's suffering and say that, you're done. Right? Like, oh, I have love, so I'm good. I mean, I guess you could say that, but it's not the love dripping from the walls that I'm talking about. If I were just talking about love dripping from the walls as an individual, I wouldn't even make this podcast. I would just be concerned with love dripping from the walls for me and how much love can I have in my life. The whole purpose of me making this podcast is so that everyone can experience love, and love at a deep and palpable and even spiritual level. And that's just not going to happen if we have an entire group of people in our country, not even talking about the whole world, just talking about in our country, that have been oppressed for generations. And for generations, they've been saying, I'm talking about Black people. For generations, Black people have been saying, listen to us. You're hurting us. You're oppressing us. This isn't fair. You're treating us unjustly. This isn't equality. We just want to be equal. For generations and generations and generations, they've been saying that. And the murder of George Floyd happened to be the tipping point of, this shit can't stand anymore. This, we've been trying to talk about it. We've been trying to do it peacefully. And I'm not just saying this like from my mouth. I'm saying this from the people that I've been following, reading about, the demonstrations that I've been watching. It's just, and I am also going to be putting some resources in the show notes as well. So this is not just, these aren't just my words, and I'll also get to that in a second as well. But this is just generations of a whole group of people being oppressed. That's like, they're just, what else can they do? And it was, again, I'm going to put this analogy came from Nicole Walters. She posted this on Facebook. She is a businesswoman. She's a Black woman, businesswoman, and entrepreneur. And she posted this amazing, like 25-minute video about what's going on. And I'll definitely post that in the show notes. But one of the things that she likens it to is the Boston Tea Party. You know, before the American Revolution, we were sending, and I say we as the people who were living in America at that time, were sending letters, petitions, pamphlets, trying to speak out peacefully about the oppression that they were experiencing. And they weren't listened to. It got worse. And then there was a tipping point where then the Boston Tea Party happened, and they burned the boats and threw the tea in the water, and or threw the sugar in the water. I did not look up the Boston Tea Party before this. I'm merely just using the analogy that Nicole Walters used. But that was the tipping point. And yes, there was destruction and burning, but the thing about being oppressed is that there's grief and anger and frustration and helplessness. And at a certain point with a group of people, it's like, what else do you do? We hear about Black people being killed unjustly, not just by police officers, but by white people. Enter Ahmaud Arbery, just running down the street in Georgia, going on a jog, being killed by two white men who weren't even arrested, let alone charged, but weren't even arrested until 2 months later. So back to my point of why I wanted to talk to you all today about these current events is to come from what I know. And because that's all I can come from. And like I said, I'm not going to get this all right. I am still learning. I am still dismantling my own internalized racism. I'm a white person. I come from the Midwest, and I moved from the Midwest to Seattle. And although Seattle is a very progressive city, it's also a very white city as well. So there's many things for me to learn about racism and white privilege. And as I'm on this journey, as I know a lot of us are on this journey, and if you're a white person, I would request that you start looking at racism and white privilege and begin to ask the questions of, okay, how does this show up for me? What is it that I'm not seeing? Because that's the thing about white privilege, is that you don't see it. It's a blind spot. It's something that you don't see. And I'll give you an example. last night I went to the grocery store, and it was around, there's a 9 p.m. curfew in Seattle right now, and because of the protests, and it was like 8:15 or something, and I was like, I'm gonna go to the grocery store because I need stuff from the grocery store. And Brandy mentioned, she was like, oh, well, there's a 9 p.m. curfew. And I said, oh, well, I'll be back by 9 p.m. And then she said, well, and I guess even if you weren't out after 9 p.m., you probably wouldn't get in trouble, which is probably true. It's probably true. I'm an attractive white female living in Seattle. If I'm out after curfew in my car, the likelihood of me being pulled over is extremely, extremely small. Extremely small that I would be. And even if I was pulled over, the likelihood of me being antagonized and even the likelihood of harm befalling me is even smaller because I'm a white female. Just because I'm a white female. That is the only fact. I had nothing to do with being white. I was born this way. I have nothing to do with being female. I was born this way. And like, not to get into non-binary and transgender, but I identify as a cis woman. And like, but I didn't have anything to do with that. That's just something that is me just because I was born, you know? So that's an example of white privilege. Very, very, very small example of white privilege. And it's something that as white people, we don't see on right, because we don't have to think about it. That's the privilege, but we don't have to think about it. We don't have to think about that. And it's also something that I've been thinking about this week as well. Seeing all of these things and seeing protests and riots, and I'm responding to it in my own way on my own platform because I do have this podcast, and it's really amazing that I have y'all as my audience, that we can have this conversation coming from love and compassion and actually start a conversation. You know, that's one way that I see that I can do my part, is by having conversations like this. And it's also my privilege that I can choose to have these conversations or not. Since I am a white person, I could choose to not have these conversations. I don't have to. You know, I could turn it off. I can turn off my I don't have a TV, but I can turn off, you know, I can shut down social media. I don't have to listen to the news. You know, I don't have to listen, period, because this quote unquote doesn't affect me, which is a lie, because we are all in this together. But that's my privilege as a white person, is that I can shut it out and turn it off if I choose to. If you're a Black person, you can't turn off having the skin color that you have. You can't, you know, put the X on, oh, I don't feel like dealing with, you know, what might happen to me as a Black person today. That's what I'm talking about with privilege. And so when we come from love and compassion, we have to start thinking about how this affects all people. If I say I love all people, then how can I stand to have people being treated the way that they are? How can I turn away from what I see is unfair and unjust? And when you look from the lens of love and compassion, I just don't see that there is a way that you could not do something. And so I'm going to talk about things that we can do to be supportive. And again, I welcome all conversation. If you are a Black person or person of color and I'm saying things that you disagree with or you think are off base, please absolutely reach out to me. I would love to have a conversation. This is something that I am continually educating myself on, and I'm not right. There's nothing that I'm saying that's the right way. These are just things that I've researched, that I've seen, that in listening to Black leadership and people of color, these are the things this is the knowledge that I have gained. And I wanted to share that with you all. And so the first thing is listen. Listen to what people are saying. We're dealing with an entire group of people that have been pushed aside and not listened to. Like I said, not listened to for generations. And we need to start listening. Period. I did it, and it's also really easy. Like, you might throughout all of this, you might think, well, how can I, who am I supposed to follow, or what can I listen to, or what information is out there? My ask of you is just to start. Use a search engine, whether that be Google, or I know there's a ton of search engines out there. That's also been a controversy recently about search engines and not using Google and things like that. But I still use Google. About who are the Black leaders in your city? Who are the people of color who are leading the people in your city? It's incredible that every single state, there's at least one city, and in most cases multiple cities in every single state, where things are happening, moving, there's protests happening. It's incredible to see. It's sad that it took us to get to this point to do this, but here we are. And so we have to start somewhere. As white people who may have not looked into the issues of race and white privilege before, here we are. Let's start here. Don't spend any time making yourself wrong or feeling bad or guilty about what you haven't done in the past. Okay, here you are now, and now let's go. Now is the time. Use Google. Go on Instagram and see, go use the hashtag Black Lives Matter. Who's posting on there? What are they posting? Who are people that that people are following, listening to? What are some of the people? There's protests being organized all throughout all 50 states. You can literally just look up, protest organizers on Google and start following them, see what they're saying, see what they're doing, research for yourself. And that leads me to my other point, which is, inside of listening, don't rely on Black people and people of color to educate you. You have to educate yourself. They have enough to do and to deal with on a regular day-to-day basis that they don't owe anything to you to take the time to educate you on racism and white privilege. That's you using your privilege to have them halt, stop everything. Now you must educate me. I know that that's not what you're saying, and that's not the intention behind what you're doing, but that's what's happening. So I request that you educate yourself. Again, I'm going to be putting lots and lots and lots of resources in the show notes. Some of the things that I've researched, some of the things that people have been giving me, some of the things that I have found on my own, some of the things that have been recommended to me, just from different people. I'm going to be putting in the show notes different protest organizers and people who have been active in the Black community as activists. Also, anyway, I'm going to put stuff in the show notes as well, so that you have resources that you can look into. And don't just trust what I put in there either. Do your own research, do your own due diligence. And the other thing inside of listening is, don't make this about you. This is not about you, white people. This is not about you. This is not about your agenda. If you are upset with how the protests are being done, like looting and rioting and burning and things of that nature, I request that you look at why these protests started. Because if we start to talk about what we do and don't like about looting and rioting, what's getting lost is, again, the Black voices that are trying to be heard, that have been speaking for a long time, and we just haven't been listening. And so I understand that you're upset about, businesses being burned down and destruction and rioting and safety. I 100% understand that concern, and I completely agree with you. And that's not the point. That is not the point. And if we don't listen, all we're going to do is to incite more protests, riots. It's like what I said at the beginning of this podcast. We have a whole group of people who've been oppressed for a very long time, who have been trying to be heard in a peaceful way, and now they're like, we're dying. What can we do? And so I also completely get why even though I don't condone violence, I completely understand why, riots are happening. I completely get it. And also on that note of riots as well, just look into who has been inciting that violence, because in some cases, and I don't have like the exact numbers and statistics of this is the percentage of people that have started these riots and this is the percentage of people that have started these riots. I don't have that information. Maybe you can look it up. I don't know if that information fully exists, but there have been a lot of videos and evidence of people starting riots to make it look like the protesters have been starting the riots. And these people have been, in some cases, a part of the police, and in some cases, a part of white supremacist groups. And you don't have to trust what I say. Go look it up for yourself and see what you find. You do not have to take my word for it. I've seen it happen. So if you want to take my word for it, you absolutely can, because I've seen it happen. But if you don't want to take my word for it, you can absolutely research that yourself. So in listening, don't make this your agenda. This is not your agenda. And even if you're a very well-meaning white person, don't make it about your agenda. The next thing that I want to talk about inside of listening is to not take things personally. And I may have wanted to say this at the beginning of the podcast, but here we are now. Don't take things personally, because again, this is not about you. And even if you are a very well-intentioned white person, I'm a very well-intentioned white person. I would like to think of myself as a very well-intentioned white person, but that's not enough. It is not enough. And you may say things. I've said things. I got a message this morning from a friend of mine that said that something that I said was inappropriate, and that he didn't appreciate it. And then, and I apologized, because it's not for me to say. Just a black friend of mine messaged me, said, "Hey, what you said was inappropriate. I didn't appreciate it." And I apologized. And sometimes when our passions get high and we say things that are really well-meaning, well-intentioned, that there's a lot of that emotional charge behind what we're saying, that if someone says, "Hey, I didn't like that, that's not appropriate," our automatic reaction is to be defensive. And that's okay. We're humans. We are humans, and that's what humans do. Humans want to defend. Hey, I was just trying to help, and I didn't know. Don't get mad at me. I'm on your side. But now you've said something that this is a sequence of events. You said something that you thought was helpful. Someone told you that it wasn't helpful. And now you're getting defensive about it. So the person that you were originally trying to defend, this person of color, they got offended by what you were saying, even though you were trying to defend them. And then they said that you were being inappropriate, and now you're upset, but now they have to console you, even though they were the person who were offended in the first place. Like, it's kind of fucked up. I mean, it's what we do as humans. So it's not like, I'm not pointing the finger, because it's definitely something that I've done, for sure. Please learn from my mistakes. But if you don't put people you're trying to defend in a position where they now have to console you, it's inappropriate. It doesn't work. It's selfish. And I want you to hear this from love, okay? I want you to hear this from love, compassion, and I know that you're a well-intentioned person, and a little bit of tough love, because don't make the person who was originally hurt, in this case, Black people are hurting. They're not being listened to. They're being oppressed. You try to defend them. You get corrected, but now we need to console you. No, that's not how it works. And was I hurt by my friend being hurt? Yeah, of course I was hurt, because I love him. He's one of my favorite people on the entire planet. I love him to pieces. And it hurt that I hurt him, but that's not for him to deal with. My emotions about that are not for him to deal with. What there is for me to do is to apologize to him, which I did. Apologize to him, like, "Hey, I'm really, really sorry." And then I said, "Do you want to have a further conversation about it?" And he said no. And then I said, "Okay." And then I apologized again, and then we moved on. I think he's still a little bit upset with me, but we can deal with that later. But what there is for me is to not put my emotions and my upset on him. He was the one that came to me and said that he was upset. So, and then again, I'm not this perfect person. I do not have it all figured out. I do have people coming to me like, "Hey, that wasn't cool." And so I'm learning. And the other thing is that don't be afraid to say something, because it might not be the right thing to say. We also can't live in fear of, "Oh, well, I'm going to say something wrong, or I'm going to say something offensive." Listen, educate yourself first, and then speak. And then if you're corrected, go back to listening. Okay, I offended you. All right, now I'm going to listen to you. Okay, now I'm going to research Why, you know, what else can I do? Okay, now I'm going to speak out again. Okay, and then maybe you get corrected again. This is a growing experience, and it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to grow at any time. It is uncomfortable to grow. Not racism aside, it's uncomfortable to grow. And racism and white privilege are very emotionally heated subjects because you're dealing with a lot of trauma with people. This is Black people as a whole. This is trauma. This is trauma for them. And this is also not to like, I also don't want to incite people like giving anyone sympathy. Like, no one needs your sympathy either. But you do need to understand that what they're dealing with and listen to that. Okay? So another thing in coming from love is don't compare your problems to what people are dealing with inside of racism. Like, it would be inappropriate for me to say, well, I understand what you're going through because I've dealt with sexism. No, I don't. No, I don't understand racism because I've dealt with sexism. It doesn't mean that I haven't dealt with sexism. I totally have. But that has nothing to do with racism. And it's a completely, I mean, although being oppressed in areas of your life have similar flavors, similar patterns, absolutely. Just because you've dealt with some other traumatic experience or oppression does not mean that you understand being Black in America. That's completely inappropriate. I'm just going to say that. It's just, it's off base, and it's inappropriate, and it's not helpful. Again, just because you're coming from a good place, like just because you're coming from, well, I understand, doesn't make it helpful. And so we need to differentiate this. And that brings me to my next point, which is the difference between things being valid and things being relevant. So your experiences in your life and whatever hardships that you have gone through are completely valid. Absolutely. Are my experiences in dealing with sexism valid? Yeah, absolutely. Is that relevant to Black people's experience in America? Nope. No, it's not. No, not in any way. Is that relevant at all? And so I know most of the time it comes, sometimes it does not. Sometimes this particular phenomena does not actually come from a good place. I see this phenomena happen when people are really defensive about the all lives matter, which is, you know, there's the Black Lives Matter movement, and then some people, mostly white people, not all white people, but mostly the people who are saying things like, oh, well, all lives matter, are white people. That's where I see this argument happen, is that, oh, well, I've experienced oppression in some way, or I've experienced hardship in some way, or I've had to work all of my life for X, Y, and Z, you know, things like that. You're not wrong. It's completely valid to you that you have had those experiences in your life. But again, this is not about you. What's happening is not about you. And it's also, no one's trying to invalidate you at all, in any way. Period. It's just that your experiences, although valid, are not relevant to Black people being oppressed in America. They're just not relevant because it's not the same thing. Period. It's just not the same thing. but I think that that really stems from, it seems to me that that stems from people just taking things really personally, like somehow taking this movement to lift Black people out of oppression into equality as some sort of slight against what has happened to them in their life. And that's not what this is. And we need to stop doing that. As people who are loving and compassionate people, we need to stop doing that, because this is not about you at all. At all. It's not about you. It's about Black people being oppressed in America and the racism that they face every single day. That's what it's about. That's what we need to be talking about. That's what we need to be listening to. And that's what we need to be educating ourselves on, so that way we can be supportive, be an ally in this situation. And again, this is something that I am continually discovering for myself. I'm not putting out this podcast as, this is absolutely every single, word of the truth, gospel episode. This is, hey, people are being oppressed and we need to fucking talk about it. And we're not going to have the love and compassion in the world that I'm committed to if there's an entire race of people being oppressed. I mean, there's multiple races of people being oppressed. And again, valid, but not relevant. We're talking about Black people in America. That's what we're talking about. And these are important conversations to have, and coming from love and compassion and being willing. That's the last thing that I want to say is being willing to have these conversations, being willing to look at where racism and oppression and white privilege affect your life, because I promise you it does. And I'm asking you, out of love and compassion, I'm asking you to be willing to look at and examine those thoughts, those underlying things, those things that you can't even see. Begin to ask the question of, how can we all be equal? How am I helping or hindering us all being equal? Where can I come from love and compassion and understanding and brotherhood and sisterhood and humanity? Where can I elevate? This is about elevation. This is about lifting people up. This is not about tearing anyone down. This is about lifting people up. And where can you start listening and being responsible in yourself, that you can begin to be an ally to our Black and brown brothers, sisters, humans, people of color who matter. And this is the beginning. Again, it might be a conversation that you've been having for a while, but for some of us, this is the beginning. And for those of you who have started now, I commend you for starting now, to have these difficult and uncomfortable conversations that are going to lead to a larger amount of love and compassion and peace and equality and harmony and justice in the world. That's why we have to be concerned about this. That's why we have to take action, because I want to live in a world where there's love and peace and justice at an overwhelming scale, where people can be equal, where people feel safe. I want to live in a world where people feel safe and where people can experience love. So I hope that you join me in this. Please leave a comment or comments. Please like and subscribe if you want to continue having conversations about love and compassion in the world. Please, if you're a person of color, and something just didn't sound correct or right, or was even counterproductive, I ask you to point that out. If you don't want to have a conversation about it, just point it out. I will research it. I will come back to you, whatever that is. I am absolutely willing to be called out for my own white privilege that I might not see right now. So thank you. And to my fellow white people who are on this journey of unlearning racism and unlearning or learning about our own white privilege, let's do this together. Yeah. Message me. Let's talk. And I would love to have larger discussions. And I know that there are also a lot of resources that I will put in the notes for having those discussions about what is racism, how do I play a part in racism, what is white privilege, what are ways in which I unintentionally or inadvertently use my privilege in ways that are detrimental or unhelpful, or just get in the way of other people's equality. And so it's time to have those conversations. These are conversations that I've had in the past. It's not something, I admit that it is not something that I talk about on a regular basis, and I would love to start having these conversations on a regular basis, checking myself on a regular basis, just really having this be alive. And I would love for this conversation to continue until it doesn't have to anymore. And I don't know when that's going to be, and it really is up to us to have these conversations about racism, about white privilege, until we don't have to. And if that takes 20 years, if that takes for the rest of our lives, then that's what we have to do. Because I'm just going to assert that you're like me, that you just want people to be loved. Like, truly, that's my mission in the world, is for people to be loved and people to experience love. And if people are constantly afraid for their life on a regular and daily basis, then that's just not going to happen. And so we have to do the work. As people of this world, we have to do the work to love one another. I love you all so much. Again, reach out to me. My email is lovedrippingfromthewalls@gmail.com. You can also find me via my website, elizabethannecunningham.com. That's Anne without an E. And you can also find me on all of my social media handles from my website. So just go to either email me, lovedrippingfromthewalls@gmail.com, or go to my website, elizabethannecunningham.com. And I really look forward to partnering with you and having this world be a better place and a more loving place. Thank you for being in this with me. Thank you for being concerned about love and equality and compassion and peace and harmony. Thank you. And I love you. I might not personally know you, but I absolutely love you. Thank you. Keep listening, keep loving.